Now that we are done working on the responsiveness of the main page, it's time to go to the next page, which is playlists. The file responsible for this page, called playlists.html. Let's open it up in the browser. And I've already gone ahead and replaced markups of header as well as the footer on this page, so that those elements are responsive, because we have already finished working on responsiveness of those elements in previous lessons. Now we're going to fully focus on making this page responsive. Let's firstly tweak paddings of the main section. We'll use padding top 24 units, padding bottom 12 units. This is only applicable for mobile devices, but for bigger screens, we're going to use 16 units for vertical paddings, and the gap between child elements will be 8 units on mobile devices, but for bigger screens, we'll make this gap 12 units. Then we're gonna decrease the font of the main heading on mobile devices. It will be 4XL. For bigger screens, we'll increase this font and make it 5XL. Also, let's increase top margin of the subheading, set it to 3 units on bigger screens, and increase the font size of this subheading also on bigger screens, set it to text LG, and therefore we no longer have to use text LG class on mobile devices, because on mobile devices the font of this heading is supposed to be smaller. Alright, moving on now to this content. So we're going to position this content vertically on mobile devices. Let's just find the wrapper element that is responsible for that content. It's this one. As you can see, it contains 2 child elements. So on mobile devices, those 2 child elements should be positioned vertically, and that is why I'm going to apply grid calls 3 class only on bigger screens. Because on mobile devices we're supposed to have only 1 column, which will be used by default. Then we'll set the gap between child elements on mobile devices to 4 units, but for bigger screens, the gap will be 8 units. We're going to add prefix sm to callspan1 class. This is the element which wraps block with filters and input field. Let's also decrease the distance between input field and the block with text. Set it to 4 units for mobile devices, but for bigger screens, we'll increase the spacing up to 6. Alright, for now we're saying that this block does not take up all available widths yet. Let's fix it by adding grid calls 1 class to the wrapper element. That means on mobile devices, this grid will consist of 1 column, which will cover all available widths. And right away, I'm also going to decrease the size of the text heading on mobile devices and increase it for other screens by setting class text LG, like so. Next one, for each individual element of this list of text, we're going to reduce roundness level on mobile devices by simply adding rounded MD class to every list item, but for bigger screens I'm going to apply rounded LG class, which is going to increase roundness level. And just because we have several such elements on the page, let me copy all these classes and apply it on the rest of elements. So once it's done, let's switch over to these extension cards on mobile devices. Every card has to cover all available widths. So let's get back to the editor and change classes of this wrapper element. This wrapper contains all those extension cards. We're firstly going to decrease the spacing between each individual card. On mobile devices, we'll set the gap to 2, but on bigger screens, the gap will be 4 units. We're also going to apply callspan1 class on mobile devices, but for bigger screens, we'll apply callspan2 class. And this way, all those extension cards will cover all available widths on mobile devices, but on bigger screens, each card will take up half of the space, and this way they will be displayed by 2 on each row on bigger screens. Actually, we also have to make this grid to have 2 columns only on bigger screens, and that's why I'm using SM prefix for grid calls to class right here. Before moving on, let's just make sure that now we have only one extension card on each row. And that is exactly what we're seeing. Now let's style individual elements within these cards. First of all, I'm going to decrease the padding of these cards on mobile devices, as well as roundness level. So let's switch back to the editor, find the markup of the first card, which is represented by this article element, and here I'm going to apply P4 class to set paddings on mobile devices, and for all other screens we're going to increase this padding up to 6. Also, let's use SM prefix for rounded LG class, but for mobile devices we're gonna decrease roundness level by applying round MD class. As for the heading of each card, I'm going to increase the font size on bigger screens, but for mobile devices the font size will be smaller. And I will also modify the font size of the subheading, reset it on bigger screens, and make it smaller on mobile devices. So now we can see the difference between the very first extension card and the next one. At least we can notice that paddings are reduced. So I have gone ahead and quickly copied and applied same classes on all other cards. And this way we are done with modifying styles for mobile devices. Now let's increase the width of the page a little bit and work on responsiveness for tablet screens. So for tablets, the first thing that I'm going to do is reduce the space in between headings as well as the main content. To do so, I'm simply going to change SM prefix to MD for gap Y12 class. So this class will be applied for screens that are bigger than tablet screens. And I would also like to position the main content on the page vertically. So we're only going to have one column in the grid. Let's change this SM prefix on MD to have 3 columns only on bigger screens. And also for bigger screens, we're gonna increase the horizontal space in between child elements within this grid and set it to 6. Now, I'm also going to apply MD prefix to callSpan1 class right here, which is going to make this block with filters take up 1/3 of all available widths on bigger screens, and the distance between child elements, and in this case those child elements are an input field as well as wrapper with all the list elements. That gap will be 6 units on bigger screens. And just because this block with filters is going to take up 1/3 of the all available widths on bigger screens, the other block should take up the rest of space on bigger screens. So I'm going to use callSpan2 class only for bigger screens. In other words, it is going to take 2/3 of all available space, because in total, within this grid, we have 3 columns. The first column takes up 1/3 of the space, and the other one takes up 2/3. In total, we get 3. Alright, cool, and just to see the result, I'm going to zoom out a bit, and at this screen width, we're seeing that filters as well as extension cards are positioned on the same row, just like we expect to. But I still prefer that at this screen width, we're still gonna get only one extension card per row. But before doing that, let's just change prefix for the gap Y6 class right here to LG, so that this spacing will be applied on bigger screens, and this is the vertical space in between an input field and the list with text. Okay, and just to have only one extension card per row on tablet screens, I'm simply going to change prefix for grid calls to class analogy. So we're only going to get 2 extension cards per row on bigger screens that are actually bigger than normal tablet screens. After doing this in the browser, on tablet screens, as you can see, we get only 1 extension card per row, but as I'm going to zoom out the page, as you can see now we're getting 2 extension cards per row. But I still think that we can arrange 3 extension cards per row on very large screens. Let's just tweak the main grid, which wraps blockways filters as well as extension cards. On middle screens, this block will contain 3 columns, but on very large screens, the amount of columns will be 4. And the gap on very large screens is supposed to be 8 units. And obviously, this prefix should be changed to XL, which means extra large. And finally, just to arrange 3 extension cards on one row, let's apply grid calls 3 class on very large screens to the wrapper, which contain all extension cards. So this way we're gonna have 3 extension cards per row. And also this wrapper is supposed to take up 3/4 of the width of the parent element on extra large screens. And we are seeing the final result. On the very large screens, we have 3 extension cards per row, and as I'm going to zoom in the page, we'll reach tablet screens where we can see only 2 extension cards per row. And as I'm going to zoom in further, once we reach mobile device screen, all elements will be positioned vertically, and there will be only 1 extension card per row. So this is how our playlists page looks like on mobile devices. Link to the source code of this project, as always, will be in the video description.